Tom, I'm not happy. I want a divorce. The words hit me like a ton of bricks, though I can't say they blindsided me entirely. After nearly 20 years of marriage, I'd noticed that Linda had been confiding in her friend Rachel a lot, too much, if I'm honest. Rachel, self-titled marriage guru, had a resume of 3 divorces under her belt, making her an expert in Linda's eyes. Tom, are you listening? I said I want a divorce. I took a deep breath, letting her words settle. Yes, Linda, I heard you loud and clear, I replied. But this isn't something I'm going to answer off the cuff. I've tried to be a caring husband and a good father. As far as I know, our intimate life has been fine, so I'm left wondering what's gone wrong. After a beat, I added, if our marriage isn't bringing you happiness anymore, as much as it pains me, I'm willing to support this decision. But tell me, Linda, has this been on your mind for a while? Or is it something that just hit you recently? She barely paused before admitting, it's been building up over time. I need space, Tom. I need to explore my options, maybe even meet new people. She seemed almost rehearsed. From what I understand, the court requires us to be legally separated for 90 days before finalizing anything. I might change my mind during that time, and maybe we wouldn't even need a divorce. I nodded slowly, thinking back to other people's separation stories. So, during these 90 days, we're both allowed to see other people, and it won't count as cheating. But after that period, if either one of us wants to finalize the divorce, we can go ahead, even if the other doesn't agree. It struck me then that Linda hadn't realized I would have the same freedom she was talking about. So, if I file the paperwork first, the choice to keep or end the marriage would be up to me too, right? For once, Linda hesitated. I guess. I thought I was clear about wanting this divorce, she stammered. Look, I said, I don't want a divorce, but I'm not going to stop you from pursuing whatever future you're after. But just to make it fair, I'll file too, so we're both on equal footing. She looked thrown. Does that mean you actually want a divorce? She asked, almost incredulously. Not really, I replied, but it feels like I was mistaken thinking I was meeting your needs as a husband, father, and partner. Her face softened just a little, but she didn't apologize. You've been wonderful, Tom, she said coolly. I just want new experiences and a little freedom. This separation would let me do that. Linda, I murmured, feeling the words stick in my throat. The fact that you need something I can't provide tells me I'm just not enough. A quiet passed between us before I asked, have you already seen a lawyer? She brushed off my self-doubt as if it didn't matter. Not yet, but I plan to talk to Connor Lewis, Rachel's divorce attorney. And there it was, Rachel's influence seeping into my marriage from the get-go. I smirked to myself. Well, I think I'll reach out to my cousin Megan to handle things on my end. Linda frowned. Ugh, Megan? She's a lot to handle, Tom. I know you're not a fan, but she's actually kind-hearted under that tough lawyer exterior. She's just fierce when it comes to defending her clients, regardless of who they are. I remembered how Megan had once, after a few too many drinks at a family party, offered to represent me for free if I ever needed a divorce attorney. Looks like I might take her up on that, I added, half sarcastic, but too drained to smile. Let's do this then, I continued. Take the next couple of weeks to get your things in order for the divorce, and we'll aim to start our separation at the beginning of the month. She agreed, but seemed puzzled. Why would we need to do anything beforehand? Isn't the separation just meant to give us a preview of what divorced life would feel like? Exactly. That way, we'll know if this is really what we want. Without some kind of trial, we'd be jumping into a mess if we realized later it was a mistake. That makes sense? She hesitated but nodded. Yeah, maybe. I hadn't really thought about it. I could see a flicker of doubt cross her face. Tell you what, I said, moving out of the bedroom toward the kitchen. Let's go make a list of what we'll need to sort out. I'll start a pot of coffee. I left her there, giving her a moment alone to let it all sink in. When she finally joined me in the kitchen, the coffee was already brewing, and I was scratching down notes in the notepad. Okay, there's a lot we need to cover, I said, glancing up at her. Let's start with the kids. She blinked. What do you mean? I mean, we have to think about how we're going to tell them. They need to understand that this isn't their fault, and we both need to be on the same page with that message. She bit her lip, looking uncomfortable. I don't know, Tom. I don't think they'll handle it well, and I'm not sure why they need to know now. Why don't we wait out the 90 days and see? I shook my head, seeing a problem right away. They're going to ask questions about why things are different, so we should have a plan for how to talk to them. Then I proposed something to help keep things feeling stable for the girls. You should stay in the house during the separation, so we can keep a little consistency. Maybe we could still spend time together here and there, just to keep things normal for them. Linda didn't look convinced. But then, how would we go about dating and keeping a social life? One of us would end up feeling resentful, Tom, especially if one of us went out while the other stayed in with the girls. Besides, this is supposed to give us a taste of life after divorce, not more of the same. I couldn't argue with that, especially since the girls would be in the middle of all this. You're right. It could be confusing for them if they see either of us with someone else. We continued discussing how we'd need to tell not only our daughters but also family and friends to prevent any misinterpretations about infidelity. We both recognized the kids might end up blaming themselves despite our reassurances, so consistency and openly expressing our love would be key. They both admitted they might need to consider counseling for the kids, but held out hope that their daughter's resilience would help them adapt. Trying to lighten the mood, I joked about how, if Linda and I ended up with new partners, the girls could score extra grandparents, which would mean more presents on birthdays and holidays. But the reality of coordinating all those events hit us. Birthdays, Christmases, Thanksgivings, all needing careful planning now. I brought up another uncomfortable topic, discretion. We'd need to meet any new friends outside the house, I pointed out, especially when the other is here with the girls. Bringing dates home would only confuse them. I could tell Linda wasn't thrilled with this suggestion, but she nodded reluctantly. Then came the talk of money. We'll both need to adjust to covering our own expenses, I told her, trying to lay it out calmly. We both knew that two separate households would cost more, and Linda looked a little rattled by it. We'll need to split up our assets and close out any shared accounts, I explained, adding that we'd also have to work out a child support arrangement so the girls' lives didn't get turned upside down financially. Linda just sat there, looking stunned as I went through everything. There's a lot to sort out before the separation begins, I said, breaking the silence. I'll start looking for an apartment closer to work so the girls can stay with me comfortably on my visitation nights. I mentioned how standard visitation usually means the non-resident parent sees the kids every other weekend and holiday, but I'd want to stay involved in their daily lives, not just show up for weekends. Linda looked at me oddly and commented that she was surprised I wasn't dating already, considering how much I enjoy spending time with the girls. I'm not planning to date seriously, Dar, I replied, shrugging off her question. I'm not disappearing from their lives. But I let her know that if she planned to move on with a new partner, she should be ready to pick up the slack for responsibilities I typically handled. We even went over how midweek visits could be tough with school and homework. There were practical hurdles too, like shuttling the girls back and forth, managing their things between two homes, and figuring out transportation since my place might not be near their bus route. I could see her irritation building as she realized I wouldn't just disappear into the background. This isn't exactly what Rachel described, she muttered, almost to herself. I could practically hear her frustration. Apparently, her friend had painted a rosy picture where I'd just go along with her plans, keep everything running at home, and let her date around. Now that things weren't falling in line, Linda seemed floored. Well, Tom, she said finally, sounding defeated, I need to sleep on this. I'm going back to bed. Maybe we'll talk more tomorrow. Sure thing, Dar, I replied, though I wasn't ready to turn in. But I need to get a few more thoughts down before I hit the sack. The more we prepare now, the smoother this will go later. I watched her head down the hall, clearly drained. Good night, Dar, I said, but she was already gone. Linda barely slept, tossing and turning, I could tell. But as soon as I closed my eyes, she must have started thinking of Rachel's advice, planning out what to say next. Sure enough, the moment she woke up, she noticed I wasn't beside her and assumed I'd stayed up all night working on our divorce checklist. But when she wandered into the kitchen to find me, she just saw my notepad on the table. I'd fallen asleep in the guest room, leaving her to stew over everything we'd discussed. While her breakfast was cooking, she took a look at my notes. I'd labeled the list as liabilities to change and spelled out every detail, adjusting the mortgage, homeowner's insurance, utilities, gas, water, electric, cable, cell phone, garbage collection, internet, and even subscriptions like Amazon Prime and LifeLock. I'd thought of everything we'd need to separate, down to the car payments, insurances, and memberships. Just looking at it all seemed to irritate her. On the next page, I'd outlined projected expenses for the apartment and child support figures, enough to cover the girls' current lifestyle. The numbers weren't pretty, showing a shortfall of a few $100s every month. I'd even added little strategies for saving money, like giving up my Waffle House and Starbucks runs, small sacrifices I was willing to make. But I noticed Linda scribbled her own expenses in next to mine, things like her gym membership, a women's group she joined, and eating out more often. It seemed she didn't plan to cut back. I jotted down the girls' expenses too, including costs for extracurriculars and school essentials. Linda's divorce plan didn't seem to account for the impact on the kids, so I wanted it on paper to keep her aware. And on another page, I made a list of all the tasks I usually took care of around the house, things Linda would have to handle herself now. Refueling the car, maintenance, calling the plumber, fixing the heat, mowing the lawn, washing the car, even routine grocery shopping. She stared at the notepad, visibly frustrated, muttering to herself, "Why isn't Tom doing what he's supposed to? Why won't he just give me what I want?" Before I knew it, she'd picked up her phone, creeping out of the kitchen to call her friend. "Hey, Rachel, it's me," she whispered, barely containing her frustration. "I need to keep my voice down. Tom's asleep in the other room." Rachel's voice came through the speaker, sounding far too excited. "How'd it go? Did he say he'd do whatever it took to keep you?" Instead of triumph, Linda sounded annoyed. "No," she muttered. "He actually agreed to the divorce without a fight, and then spent all night listing out everything he does that I'd have to pick up if we go through with it. Tom plans to get an apartment and only see the girls on weekends. He's dead set on living as if we're already divorced, saying we need to get a taste of that life to decide if we really want it by the end of the 90 days, Linda confided over the phone to Rachel. He's not even nervous about the idea of divorcing, which is starting to make me wonder what I should do next. I thought he'd be devastated. "Oh, Linda, he's just bluffing to control you," Rachel scoffed. "He wants you to feel dependent. All that talk about his contributions is just his way of making you feel like he's indispensable." Her voice dropped to a knowing tone. "But remember, you hold the power over two things, your kids and your bed. Those are your trump cards. Just bide your time. Soon enough, you'll be spending nights with Mark without a care in the world, and you'll still have Tom on the sidelines." "I hope you're right," Linda sighed, thinking about whether Mark was worth the trouble. "Tom hasn't taken any drastic steps yet. I'll stay firm and wait to see his next move." She glanced over as Tom started to get up. "I have to go, Rachel." "He's up. Talk later." Tom shuffled into the kitchen, and Linda tried to sound casual. "Hey, Tom, coffee?" "No thanks," he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "Probably not a good idea to drink it this late. I barely slept. Why didn't you come to bed?" She bit her lip, waiting for his answer as he leaned against the counter. "I needed some air. Took a walk," he finally said. "Honestly, I didn't trust myself." He looked at her and paused. "I saw you there, asleep, and I couldn't help but think how beautiful you are. I didn't want us to end up in bed just because you felt sorry for me." "But Tom," she coaxed, "we're still married. For now, I'm still yours, so can't we? I mean, shouldn't we still be together, at least until the separation is official?" "I'm sorry, Dar," he replied, shaking his head. "I just can't pretend like everything's normal. You've already said you're unhappy, and as much as it pains me, I have to let you go. I'll stick to my word and give this separation the start it needs." He sighed, looking almost defeated. "It's going to be hard, but I want you to be happy, even if I'm not the one making you feel that way anymore." Linda put a hand on his arm, trying to reassure him. "Just because we're separating doesn't mean it has to end in divorce, Tom. Can't you just give me some time to figure things out? We might come back stronger. Maybe this space will help us." Tom looked unconvinced. "Sure, Dar. I'd like to believe that, but I don't see it. I'm going to take today off and get a head start on things." Billy will cover the work crews, so I can make calls about splitting our finances and getting my account set up. Then he glanced at the clock and added, "Oh, and don't worry about being late for work. I'll make breakfast for the girls and get them to school." Later that morning, Mark, her flirtatious coworker, swung by Linda's office with his usual charm, suggesting they get together soon to listen to some music. She felt a surge of excitement but brushed it off, her mind quickly flashing back to the steamy moment they'd shared in the elevator. Suddenly, she realized her thoughts had strayed far from Tom and her ongoing separation. When she got home that evening, she noticed signs that Tom had been there, which oddly relieved her. She didn't feel ready to confront the financial plans he'd been talking about, but at least he hadn't packed up and disappeared. All right, 90 days of freedom, she thought to herself. We'll stay married, and I'll find a way to keep things with Mark discreet. Sitting down at the kitchen table, she flipped through her notepad. Tom had scribbled a few more items under the to-do list, but a new page caught her eye. A list titled Possible Women for Today. It had 2 columns, one labeled Women Who Have Already Expressed Interest, and the other Women I'd Like to Know If They're Interested. She felt her stomach drop when she spotted her sister Sandra's name right at the top of the first column. Fuming, she grabbed her phone and called Sandra. "Hello? Linda, is that you?" "How could you, Sandra?" Linda snapped. "Are you trying to steal my husband?" "Whoa, slow down. What are you talking about?" Sandra shot back, taken aback. "Tom made a list of women who told him they'd date him, and your name is on it." Sandra sighed, clearly unbothered. "Oh, that? I told him once, after a few too many drinks, that if he ever left you, I'd be interested. He deserves better, Linda, especially if you're running around thinking of dating someone else." Linda was caught off guard. "Wait, you're seriously interested in him?" "Maybe I am," Sandra replied coolly. "And what's this about a list? Are things that bad between you two, or is he the one seeing someone else?" "That's not the point," Linda stammered. "I just told him I needed some time to explore things." Sandra snorted. "Right. So, who's the someone else, Dar? Or is there more than one?" "No one," Linda insisted. "We're in a 90-day separation to decide if we still want this marriage. That's all." Sandra didn't buy it. "Look, if Tom's separating from you legally, it means he's a free man in a few months. And you can bet that if he's available, I'll be more than willing to see where things go with him." Linda felt herself growing defensive. "I've been a good wife, Sandra. This separation was my decision, even though he's been a decent husband, father, provider, everything." "Well, you're not acting like it," Sandra shot back. "If you walk away from a man like Tom, don't be surprised if he moves on fast. There aren't many men out there who'd put up with this. And if he does become available, you better believe I'll be the first in line." With that, Sandra hung up, leaving Linda stewing. She knew she'd taken Tom for granted, but now that her sister was willing to step in, things suddenly felt all too real. Sandra's words rang in Linda's ears as she hung up, urging her to let her know the moment she was free from Tom. Linda took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease from their conversation. She glanced again at Tom's lists, her eyes drawn to one name in particular, Tina, his secretary, a gorgeous, young single mom, practically 2 decades younger than Tom. It was a bit unsettling to see her name at the top of the list, possibly viewing Tom as a stable provider for her and her kid. But what irked Linda more was the other names. One was married, clearly marked with an M next to her name. The rest were women who worked in Tom's business or around town, some of whom Linda recognized. Linda knew Tom had a psychology degree but had always stuck with the trades. He'd built up his business, running 3 different teams, yet she couldn't help but wonder if he was inspecting more than just the plumbing in these women's lives. The unnamed ones, listed only as Waffle House waitress, Starbucks barista, and Walmart clerk, left her wondering just how many women out there found him as appealing as her own sister apparently did. She hadn't seriously thought he'd move on during their separation, but it was starting to look like he was already making plans. Just then, Tom walked in and caught her flipping through his notes, her face tight with annoyance. He seemed to sense what was coming. "Couldn't wait to line up a replacement, huh?" Linda shot at him, her voice dripping with resentment. "And my own sister, no less." "Oh, I was just keeping pace with your search for a boyfriend," Tom replied, calm but pointed. What are you talking about? She huffed. I don't have a boyfriend. I just wanted some space, maybe to meet new people. Yeah? What about Mark Benson? Tom asked, watching her reaction closely. She faltered. How do you know about him? He shrugged. Well, I ran into Denise, your boss's secretary, over lunch at Walmart. She's a bit of a gossip, you know? Don't believe everything she says, Linda snapped, but her curiosity was piqued. So, what exactly did she say? Oh, just that you and this Mark fellow are close friends now and have lunch together nearly every day. Tom watched her face for a response. According to her, Mark's in and out of your office more often than the janitor. He's an old friend from college, Linda said quickly, trying to sound casual. We've been catching up, that's all. Right? Tom replied, not missing a beat. So he's one of the new relationships you're exploring during our separation? Look, Tom, it's not serious, she muttered. We've barely done anything but talk. He's just someone nice, someone who compliments me, even on days when I'm not feeling my best. Uh-huh. Anything more than that? Tom pressed, noticing the flicker in her expression as she thought back to their steamy elevator moment. Linda's face tensed. He's not married, if that's what you're getting at. Not married, huh? Have you checked his Facebook lately? Tom countered, tapping his fingers on the counter. Found it pretty easily, actually. Linda's face paled. You're kidding. Is this the same Mark Benson? Tom gave a short nod. Yep. And what does his profile say? She looked down, embarrassed. It says he's married to Laura and has 2 kids. 3 days ago, his wife even posted a new picture of them together. Seems like they're not as over as you thought, he said, watching her squirm. Linda bristled. He never told me he was married. I would never try to ruin someone's marriage. Tom raised an eyebrow. But you're okay with breaking up our marriage? The silence between them was thick, and Linda knew she was cornered. Mark was the main reason she had considered ending things with Tom, but she couldn't let him know that. He's just one of a few people I might consider, she deflected. Besides, if you get to make a list, I can too. Tom rolled his eyes. Fine, Dar. But if we're considering dating, we should both get checked for STDs, just in case. Tom, that's disgusting, Linda shot back, her face reddening. It's just a precaution, he replied coolly. I wasn't really planning on seeing anyone, but, you know, if the situation calls for it, I'd want us both to be safe. It's not just about you. Linda fumed silently, but Tom quickly moved on, sensing he'd made his point. Anyway, I promise to keep you updated on the separation arrangements. There's a lot to cover by the 1st of the month, especially with bank accounts and finances. Today, I started on the basics, figuring out the mortgage, utilities, and all that. The big news, though, is about the apartment. Oh, she said, forcing herself to sound polite. Turns out Tina, my secretary, works part-time as a night manager at the Royal Arms Apartments. They've got a 2-bedroom available, close to work. Normally, it'd be expensive, but if I take on some maintenance duties there, I get a 50% discount. Pretty good deal, don't you think? Linda felt a knot form in her stomach. Not only was he ready to move out, but he was also planning to make himself scarce in a place where he'd be mingling with other single tenants, and Tina, who'd conveniently be around to manage things. This means more money for you, and the kids, you know, Tom remarked, still looking over the apartment paperwork. Linda's eyes narrowed. But you haven't signed that lease yet, have you? She asked, trying to keep her voice even. We still have 90 days, Tom. Maybe if you keep an open mind, we'll get things back on track, and you won't need to move out at all. She held back a comment about his secretary being a gold digger, deciding that wouldn't help matters right now. No, I haven't signed anything yet, Tom replied calmly. But I did have to explain to Tina why I was looking. She said they don't usually do short-term leases, but she could probably pull some strings for the 90 days. Of course, when she learned about our separation, she started showing interest in me. To be honest, I was surprised. She's much younger, and I didn't think she saw me that way. He paused, glancing at Linda's tense face. I told her I wasn't interested. It's against workplace policy. She even offered to leave her job if that would make it easier. He gave a half smile. That's why her name ended up on my list. Linda was fuming, but she forced herself to stay silent. Commenting would only make things worse. But Tom didn't wait for her response. Oh, and there's something else I need to tell you. He looked her straight in the eyes, watching her reaction carefully. I had 2 tickets booked for a 10-day trip to Hawaii. It was supposed to be a surprise for our 20th anniversary. Linda's expression changed instantly. Hawaii? Oh, Tom, you know I've always dreamed of going there. I can already see myself on those beaches, swimming in the ocean. She beamed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But Tom didn't smile back. Well, here's the thing. When you brought up divorce, it hit me that we might not make it to 20 years together. I tried to cancel, but it was too late, and they would only give me a partial refund. Linda's face fell. So, no Hawaii? Tom continued. I figured the trip meant more to you than it ever did to me. So I had them change the tickets to your name and a guest of your choice. If there's someone new you're interested in, you can treat him to an all-expenses-paid Hawaiian vacation. Linda's face turned from excited to stunned. But I wanted to go with you, Tom. Can't we put this separation on hold? Maybe even call it off entirely? I've thought about things, and maybe I was wrong. I'm not as unhappy as I thought. Tom shook his head slowly. Linda, I've thought about this a lot too. I don't think I could ever be at peace, knowing you were ready to walk away so easily. Even if you change your mind now, you can't take back the words you said, or the image of you and Mark in the back of my mind. He paused, swallowing hard. So I'm planning to move forward with the divorce, even though I can't imagine being anything less than a full-time dad to our girls. With that, he turned and made his way upstairs to the guest bedroom. Linda sat there, frozen. She felt utterly blindsided, and only one person came to mind for help. She dialed Rachel. Rachel, she said, her voice breaking, it's all falling apart. Tom's already found an apartment, and his slim little secretary is practically throwing herself at him. And if that wasn't enough, my sister even wants to date him. And the worst part? He had tickets to Hawaii for our anniversary, and now he's giving them to me and told me to take my new boyfriend instead. What am I supposed to do? Hold up, Rachel said. What's the problem? You and Mark could have an amazing time, soaking up the sun and enjoying each other. Linda shook her head, though Rachel couldn't see. No, Rachel. Mark is married. His wife and kids are moving here soon. I can't go to Hawaii with him. I want to go with Tom. Rachel's tone shifted, and she chuckled darkly. Wow, Tom's a lot more cunning than I gave him credit for. All this about a surprise Hawaii trip? It's a ploy, Linda. He wants you feeling guilty, so you'll back down on the divorce. He's manipulating you, plain and simple. Linda sighed, frustration boiling under her skin. I never imagined he'd pull something like this. He's going to regret playing these games. Thank you, Rachel. I needed to hear that. I was close to giving in, but not now. Tom's going to pay for this. She hung up, just in time to see Tom coming down the stairs, a small suitcase in his hand. Oh, are we already pretending you're moving out? She sneered. Fine by me. Goodbye and good riddance. Tom raised an eyebrow. Actually, I was just taking a few things to the apartment ahead of time. Tina offered to let me start moving stuff in since it's already vacant, and I don't want to shock the girls by packing all at once. He glanced at her coolly. But I can see your mood's changed. Let me guess. You've been talking to Rachel? Rachel's a divorce expert, Linda shot back. She understands what I'm going through. And she figured out your little Hawaii scam. She knows you're just trying to guilt-trip me into staying. But it won't work. I still want the divorce, and I'm going to see it through. There are plenty of men out there ready to meet my needs. Tom just nodded, his expression calm. You're absolutely right, Linda. You'll have no shortage of men vying for your attention. He smiled faintly. I've always considered myself lucky to have such a beautiful wife, a great partner in raising our girls, and, until recently, a loyal spouse. Her face flushed with anger. Nice try, Tom. You can stop lying about Hawaii now. I know you didn't have a trip planned. It was just another trick. Tom shook his head. Believe what you want, but I can prove it. Let me call Nora Watson at Flightright Travel Agency and let her tell you herself. Without waiting, he pulled out his phone, dialing as he walked back into the kitchen. Linda watched, a sinking feeling in her gut, as she overheard Tom's calm voice on the line. "Hi, Nora. It's Tom Foster. My wife's on speaker here, and she has some questions about the Hawaii booking. Could you explain the details?" Linda's heart sank as she realized, for the first time, that Tom might actually be telling the truth. Nora's voice on the phone was warm, though her words were laced with sympathy. "Mr. Foster, it sounds like you were really excited to surprise your wife and take this trip together. Mrs. Foster, what can I clarify for you?" Linda's voice was tense as she pressed. "Could you describe exactly what's included in this trip?" "Of course," Nora replied cheerfully. "This is our 10-day adventure across 2 islands, complete with stays in our highest-rated hotels, all meals included, transportation, hula lessons, and even an authentic luau with traditional tiki performances. There are options for surfing, swimming, and dancing, all set in a romantic atmosphere. It's designed to be a deeply meaningful experience for couples, and many have found it transformative for their relationships." Linda was sure she'd catch them in a lie. "And when did my husband arrange this trip?" she demanded. Nora didn't hesitate. "Let's see. He initially inquired about this package 3 months ago and finalized it 2 months ago, making full payment about 2 weeks later. Yesterday, he reached out to cancel, and we were only able to offer him a 20% refund. I was genuinely surprised when he suggested that you still take the trip with someone else. It sounds like he's quite a devoted husband." "You're very fortunate, Mrs. Foster." Linda's face fell. She managed a clipped "thank you. I'll call back with the name of my guest," before hanging up. Her mind raced, but a theory finally clicked into place. She turned to Tom with an accusatory glare. "So, you think you've outsmarted me again, don't you? You and Nora cooked up this whole Hawaii scheme just to make me feel guilty, hoping I'd back down. But I figured you out." Tom shook his head, looking exhausted. "Linda, you might want to call your parents." She froze, caught off guard. "What do they have to do with this? Who do you think was going to watch the girls while we were away?" Tom replied calmly, pulling out his phone and dialing. Linda's mother picked up almost immediately. "Hello, Tom. How are the girls?" "Hi, Mom," Linda interjected, her voice hesitant. Tom put the call on speaker, and her father's voice sounded in the background. "Frank, it's Tom and Linda," her mother called out. "Pick up the phone." Frank joined the call. "What's going on, you two?" he asked, his tone curious. When Linda stayed silent, Tom spoke up. "Well, Linda knows about the trip now, so there's no need for secrecy. Oh, son, we're so sorry you can't make it. You didn't say why when you called earlier, but I hope you're both all right." Frank sounded genuinely concerned. "We were looking forward to having the girls here for 10 days. Linda, we know how much you wanted this trip. Have you decided who'll go with you?" Linda stammered, "No, Mom, I haven't thought about that yet." Then, cautiously, she asked, "When did Tom tell you about the trip?" "I think it was around New Year's, wasn't it, Frank?" her mother replied. "He mentioned it so we'd have time to prepare snacks. These girls can eat just about anything and never gain an ounce." She chuckled softly. "Tom," her mother asked with concern, "is everything all right with you two? When Tom called, did something happen?" "Oh God," Linda's mother's voice was choked with worry. "Are you two splitting up?" "Mom," Linda interjected quickly, "no, it's not exactly like that. We're just taking a little space, a separation to see if we can recharge the marriage and then, maybe, reconnect." Tom's voice was hard as he cut in. "I'm not going to lie to your parents, Linda. They've always been upfront with me." Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. "Linda, honey, is that true? You're starting a divorce?" Linda tried to soothe her. "Mom, please don't be upset. I only wanted some time to figure things out, to become a better version of myself for you, for Tom, and for the girls." Frank didn't buy it. "Linda, that sounds like a lot of nonsense. Is there someone else you're interested in?" "No, Dad," Linda replied, her voice faint. "There's no one." Her father's disappointment was palpable, and her mother's quiet sobs were audible in the background. "I can't believe you're doing this," her father said bitterly. "We raised you to value family. Don't think we'll be welcoming any new man into our lives. Tom, you're like a son to us, and we're so sorry." Just promise us we'll still be able to see the girls after all this." Before Tom could respond, Linda broke in, trying to salvage the situation. "This has all been blown out of proportion," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm taking it all back. No separation. No divorce. I'll talk to you later, Mom, when things calm down." Tom looked at her with a mix of weariness and resolve. "You need to pull yourself together, Linda. The girls will be home soon." He picked up his suitcase and headed toward the door. "Wait," she said, reaching out. "Where are you going?" "I said I don't want a divorce." "You don't have to go." Tom turned back to her, his voice steady but firm. "You decided you wanted a divorce all on your own, without even talking to me first. And now that it's not going the way you expected, you think you can just declare that we're staying together? It doesn't work that way, Linda. I have a voice too. And after everything I've learned about you this past week, I'm not so sure that giving up on this divorce is a good idea." He left her standing there, her mind reeling as she realized she might have lost the upper hand, possibly for good. "I'll grab a sleeping bag from the garage and stay at the apartment tonight," Tom said, his voice firm as he lifted his suitcase. "Tom, please don't go," Linda pleaded, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry. Look, this whole divorce talk was a mistake, and I know I messed up. Can't we just put it behind us and go back to how things were? You were happy, and I was happy too. I don't want to lose everything over one bad decision." Tom sighed heavily, his face unreadable. "But I can't forget that you admitted to being unhappy and were ready to start something with Mark. As far as I'm concerned, that was infidelity in intent if not in action. Megan mentioned she could have the divorce papers drawn up quickly. You could be served as early as tomorrow." Linda's voice hardened. "I won't sign them." "That doesn't matter. As long as you're served, the process can move forward. Maybe I'll even have you served at work, with Mark there to witness it. Your boss could face consequences too, given the company's strict rules about office relationships." "Why are you being so cruel?" Linda whispered, her face pale. "I love you. You love me. Why are you going to these lengths? Isn't there anything I can do to fix this? I know you said divorce would hurt us both. Can't we avoid all this pain? I swear, I'll never bring up this divorce idea again if you'll just stay and give me one more chance." Tom stood silent, watching her. Linda felt a glimmer of hope, sensing he might be reconsidering. "I'll be the best wife," she vowed. "I'll never even look at another man. I've given you 2 beautiful kids, supported your business all these years, even when it meant you coming home late, exhausted. I'm proud of everything we've built together. Everyone makes mistakes, Tom. Please, please give me one more chance." After a long pause, Tom finally spoke. "All right, here's what I'll do. I'll take my suitcase and sleeping bag to the apartment, but I'll come back at 7. Between now and then, I want you to do a few things." Linda's voice was eager. "Yes, anything. Tell me what you need." "First, I want a written apology. I need you to truly beg for forgiveness, not just ask for it. Secondly, you'll need to tell Mark not to contact you again, and let him know that any further communication could lead to legal action for him and your company if he continues to cross boundaries. Third, I want a list of reasons why I should stay married to you." He paused, his face darkening. "And last, you'll need to call Rachel and tell her you're cutting ties. Permanently. I don't ever want to hear her name in our lives again. That one is non-negotiable. Do you understand?" Linda nodded vigorously, determination filling her. "Yes, Tom, I understand. I'll do everything you asked. I'll have it all ready by 7. Tom gave her a nod and left, his expression guarded. As soon as the door closed, Linda took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew the hardest task on the list would be breaking things off with Rachel, but the idea of finally cutting her out filled her with a strange sense of relief. She dialed Rachel, mentally rehearsing her words. "Rachel, I need to tell you something," she began firmly. "Listening to you was the worst decision I ever made. I nearly lost my family because of it. Don't call, don't text, don't email, and if I see you out in public, don't even look my way. We're done." She hung up, feeling lighter than she had in months. Next, she dialed Mark and relayed Tom's warning, cutting him off before he could beg for one last rendezvous. His insults and accusations were met with a steely silence, as she told him any more contact would mean a call to his wife. She felt an odd satisfaction at watching him squirm. Finally, Linda sat down to write her reasons for wanting to save her marriage with Tom. What had once seemed mundane now felt like a treasure, and the words flowed easily as she reflected on all the moments they'd shared. Writing it all down, she felt ashamed of how close she'd come to losing the one person who truly cared about her. How foolish, self-centered, and naive I was, she wrote, vowing to herself, never again. When the clock struck 7, Linda waited, her heart pounding. 5 minutes later, Tom returned, walking in without his suitcase. His face was unreadable as she handed him her written responses, her hands trembling slightly. Tom read her words in silence, his eyes misting over. Seeing him tear up, Linda felt a surge of hope and moved to embrace him, but he held up a hand, signaling her to wait. "Linda," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "I can see you put a lot of thought into this, and it's impressive, really." He looked at her, sadness lingering in his eyes. "But I'm not sure you understand how much this has hurt me. I can't just erase what's happened or go back to the way things were. I think I still need to proceed with the divorce." Her face crumpled, and she collapsed to the floor, her sobs filling the room. She felt a despair unlike anything she'd known, as though her heart had shattered. "I've ruined everything," she choked out. "I've destroyed my family, and I don't deserve to live." She buried her face in her hands, consumed by guilt and regret. Tom knelt beside her, his voice a quiet whisper. "Now you understand how I felt." He stood and headed toward the door but paused, glancing back at her. "During the separation, are we allowed to see other people?" Linda looked up, struggling to control her tears, uncertain what he meant. "If dating others is part of this process, what are your plans for Friday night?" he asked, his voice softening. "Would you like to have dinner with me? Maybe see a movie?" Linda's eyes widened, her heart skipping a beat. "You're asking me on a date?" "Yes," he said, a small smile breaking through his solemn expression. "I think our old relationship might be gone, but maybe we can start fresh." With renewed hope flooding her heart, Linda sprang to her feet, 1,000 thoughts rushing through her. "Yes, Tom, yes. 1,000 times yes."